Welcome to the Markets Happy Hour podcast, a weekly markets update for investors the world over. Each week we discuss inflation, geopolitics, interest rates, equity markets, and other asset classes. To try to answer the question, what does this mean for my investment portfolio? Let's dive in.
I think what I had asked Jay immediately was on the fiduciary side, because I think that it gets bits of the judgment around character, but equally whether AI could be moving to just to the board level. Where is the real expertise that we wish to pay for? And this will eventually, we'll talk about this in the human capital development side, because this is skills around either judging venture capitalists, judging when to exit a stock, or when to be on a board and when to assert yourself from a governance standpoint. That's very much a human skill. Do you think AI can provide a role or have a role in, say, a board of directors?
So this was, when you mentioned that the other day, as I said at the time, that just set my mind racing, thinking about board meetings that I might not be required to attend. That was actually quite fascinating. I do think so. I think that, the way, and here specifically with large language models, they're dependent on the corpus of information on which they've trained. And I think one of the interesting developments that you've seen, it really started with consumer focus groups, right? Where, and a lot of the major food and beverage companies do this type of thing, where they'll train a model on a particular set of documents, and then they'll train another model on another set of documents, and they'll literally have them argue and debate. And I think I am still very much a human in the loop believer. That debate is basically useless unless there's a human who's alongside it. But I could certainly see in a board situation the utility of having different almost personas, maybe a skeptic, maybe something like that, where pick apart the logic of this argument. Those models should do quite well there. How you integrate it in the social fabric of a board is a totally different question. That's quite interesting as well. But I certainly think it can be useful in that sense.
It's interesting because I think one of the hardest things to do as a board member is provide challenge, because that's the conflict, that's the human aversion to conflict, to speaking out. There can be imposter syndrome that's experienced by board members, or just general piggybacking on a consensus. So there could be, AI could be the classic devil's advocate, but I think we know in any situation where we assign someone a devil's advocate, it's not really authentic. So it kind of gets underweighted then for that reason. So whether AI would be afforded less weight because it's the token AI contributor, or whether it gets more weight because it is the omniscient, all abundant intelligence, has seen it from every angle, doesn't bring emotional baggage to the table.
It could. I mean, in that, I think that as we've seen communications technology and its evolution in the last 15, 20 years, it has certainly meant that more meetings of people or gatherings or media are happening in echo chambers, right? And yeah, in many ways, I think, and effectively what's happening is human minds are effectively being trained in their own corpus of data, whether it's political or even in economic theory. You tend to just listen to the things that you agree with. And I think these models are able to look at both of them and as you say, be much more objective about it.
And one of the other areas, when some people here have been lawyers in the past life, or and even on the venture side, a lot of the value is added in the negotiation. Whether it's negotiating the term sheet, whether it's as a lawyer negotiating a contract, negotiating a price, negotiating terms. Have these models been tested as negotiators? And could you put the models against each other, the two agents, just like we had on Moltbook, everybody socializing together, building religions, conspiring? Could you put two agents together to just crank out a contract and come out with the best set of outcomes?
I mean, I think so, but I wonder, I haven't decomposed the verbs of what the negotiation would really entail, right? Because I think finding a middle ground and that could be very interesting, but I think that requires a separate deconstruction along similar lines because many of the steps may not be needed. If you think about, again, to go into a mundane example from our industry is the RFP process, right? So once large language models started becoming a bit more mainstream, everyone said, oh, this can automate the RFP process. And not that it can't, but the reality is now you've got an AI-generated RFP being read by another AI. It doesn't seem like the RFP is a necessary step. That is not the most effective way of communicating between two machines. And so I don't know. I mean, it's a very long way of saying I don't know the answer to your question.